Tish James is gearing up to seize property from Donald Trump, and we think this is going to backfire. Been saying this for some time. Let's see how she runs a golf course or a building. What if she wraps a big chain around Trump Tower, puts a padlock on that, and everyone who shows up to work goes, what? We got to check in with Tish now? It's not going to go so well for them. And Americans and people in general, I think, have a difficulty understanding what $500 million means, right? It's just big numbers. We hear these all the time, and it's hard to wrap your head around it. But when the building gets seized and when there's cops saying that you can't go in there, that's a different feel, because everybody knows what property is. We all work very hard to obtain property. It's still part of the American dream to own your home. And so now when some big Tish comes in and steals it from you, that of course is a concern. Now CNN is saying that on the heels of the court deadline, Trump still has not posted this $500 million bond, and that Tish is taking some steps to seize this, right? Filing different provisions all over New York to get ready to pounce. So we'll see what they say, but it's not just us who say this whole thing is really boneheaded. I almost kind of hope they do it. I kind of am hoping Trump here just says, all right, let's play. You want to play a game of chicken? Let's go, Tish. See how you do here, because it's not going to work out well for them. And Frank Luntz agrees with us. Frank Luntz says this will backfire and this will guarantee Trump's election. And everybody over there on this panel is like, gulp. You know, they're not too happy about that. And I think Kimmel proves this point. He's explaining that they're salivating over the seizure of this property. Trump reacts, a lot of other reaction from other people. And so let's see what CNN has for us about what is happening there in New York. You see this one posted on Friday, just a short time away from the deadline, says Tish is taking the initial steps to prepare to seize Trump's assets. Okay, Tish, you're playing with fire here. The New York Attorney General's office has filed judgments in Westchester County, the first indication that the state is preparing to try to seize Trump's golf course and his private estate north of Manhattan. We knew this yesterday. Now, state lawyers entered the judgments with the clerk's office in Westchester County back on March 6th, right? Just 1 week after Engoron made official his decision. So Tish has been plotting this for quite some time. The decision against Trump and the difficulty that Trump has been having in securing bond, they say strikes at his image as a billionaire. I don't think so. Even if you are a billionaire, you're like, you don't have 500 million just sitting around liquid in cash. Now, entering a judgment from Tish would be the first step that a creditor would take to attempt to recover property. Additional steps like putting liens on the assets or moving to foreclosure or taking other actions might also come down. Now, the judgment is already entered in New York City, where Trump's properties, including Trump Tower, his penthouse at Trump Tower, 40 Wall Street, his hotel abutting Central Park, and numerous apartment buildings are located. And so that's the theory. Okay, which one is Tish going to take? And let's see how she does running apartment buildings. Now, judgments have not been entered in Florida counties, so including Miami or Palm Beach, where the Mar-a-Lago property, right? I don't think they want to go down to Florida. I don't know if they're going to play this stupid game, but New York certainly will, right? Like the New York courts will just buckle over for Tish. She's the state AG. So the Doral Golf Club, located in Cook County, Illinois, also doesn't have a judgment. Says where Trump's hotel in Chicago is located, and CNN is reviewing all these records. So Trump now has 4 days to satisfy this judgment or get the appeals court to allow him to post a smaller amount or to defer posting any payment until after the appeal. And, you know, the idea, again, we talk about this concept called due process of law. We have to talk about, you know, there's two components or two types of due process we talk about in the law: substantive due process and procedural due process. So substantive is kind of about the substance of the law. What type of due process, or what does the law say? What is the law applying to? Is that implicating one of your rights? And then the procedure is sort of how is the process happening? Not so much about the law as being applied, but it's about the process of a valid law. So here, what happens if you appeal, but you can't afford your appeal? Do you really have the right to an appeal? No. So this question that we're getting into, and we're going to hear from the congressman from New York later. So the AG's office will be allowed to file a written response to Trump's claims. Trump said, you know, not possible. Bonding companies just don't do this. Here's one of the properties. Nice, beautiful area. And it'd be very cool to see Tish there with a big chain and some caution tape wrapped around the whole building, and the people who reside there, the people who work there, being kept out by armed cops, right? Trump showing up and being kept out by armed cops from his own property because Tish has seized it. How'd that go down? So the process to seize the assets would not be quick or easy. And we're going to read from Trump's posts on True Social, and I kind of get the vibe that he's goading her a little bit. He's like, okay, come and take it, Tish. You want your $500 million? Come and take it. Put your shoes on and come on over and take it, all right? Don't stink up the place. So Trump has structured his business by setting up LLC companies for nearly every property or asset, over 300 in total, smart, ultimately are controlled by his trust. And there have been some great questions that have popped up here about, well, what if Trump just grants all of this to Barron? Or what if he, passes passes this off to Melania. What happens then? Obviously, that would be, convenient if you could do that, but that would be a fraudulent conveyance, and they would go after him for fraud, really, and seize more than that. So they are complexly organized, and he is not on paper the owner. Yeah, and therefore, a judgment against him would not be executable directly against certain properties. Sorting this out is not going to be simple. It's not going to be quick. And this is why entrepreneurs, business owners layer themselves in LLCs. We want to protect ourselves from claims, literally. It's like limited liability, right? You're not as liable personally. And that's a nice feature of American capitalism and our economic structure here, is that we give people the opportunity to create these corporate structures, these corporate vessels, so that they are not personally liable, that it enables people to take more risk and do more things. But so this is, very common to layer your stuff in LLCs. So Trump's, he's like, I am the owner, it's LLCs. So if the judgment is against him and not that particular LLC, what's Tish going to do? They are complexly organized, said Nico Passis, a professor of criminology at Northeastern. So in the meantime, she could obtain bank levies and go after the bank assets. She could put liens on the properties. There are all kinds of things she's going to be able to do in an effort to collect, and we'll see what that looks like. Now, all this is completely undermining the brand, says this guy, which he uses for the most part, making the money all around the world. I don't know about that. We're going to hear from Frank Luntz. I think that the brand that's under attack by the federal government is pretty resilient. It stands out, that's for sure. And I don't know that people hold it against the brand. Now, some weirdos right on the left do. They still believe the Justice Department is about justice. Like 8-year-olds. Okay, I'm sure, like the Center for Disease Control, right? They do the same thing. They control diseases. Okay, hilarious. So, all right. So all this is done to completely undermine the brand. I totally disagree with that. I think the brand's going to come out stronger than ever because it's seen as illegitimate, a lot of this. So all of it. Trump's attorneys push back on the bond ideas. So separately, Trump's lawyers pushed back yesterday on several of the suggestions that they made about how he can pay bond. So they said, well, Trump can just get several bond writers. They just go get all the bond writers. And Trump, would still have to post $500 million in cash or stock, but they say it's money that he doesn't have. Trump's legal team, and let's mince words on this for sure, because money that he doesn't have, right? Trump responds, and it's like, well, technically I do have it, but it's not for you, right? We're going to get into that. I got $500 million, but that's earmarked for the campaign. Engoron knows that. He wants to take that money for his rigged prosecution so they can hold that in escrow pending appeal. Trump will probably get a lot of that back, if not all of it, once this is thrown out, but it's held in abeyance pending the election. So he can't use it. It's not liquid and material to the case, to the election, 2024. Kind of need that money. So Trump, he doesn't have it. He doesn't have it for you, Tish. That's the distinction. It's not for Areola Engoron and New York's coffers. It's for the 2024 campaign. That's what we're using it for. So Trump's legal team argued in the filing that the New York Attorney General's office shouldn't be able to challenge their claims. If no arrangement is met, Tish said that she's going to take steps to seize assets. We'll see. Office said this week that it's common for large companies to post billion-dollar bonds, and Trump should have posted his real estate. Trump's team responded. They said the suggestion is both impractical and unjust. AG Tish cites no New York case law to support this contention, and in any event, from the perspective of risk, the AG's proposal of, quote, a court-appointed officer to, quote, hold real estate is functionally equivalent to what the Supreme Court has already imposed through the requirement of a court-appointed monitor to oversee the business. So Tish doesn't even know what she's asking for. Trump's lawyers also said that if they're forced to sell properties at a fire sale, that's going to be irreparable injury. We can't later recover the property if we win on appeal. So you are harming us by appealing. And by demanding an undertaking in the full amount, Tish and Engoron Areola have sought to impose patently unreasonable, unjust, and unconstitutional bond conditions. Now, the monitor, the judge also, right, in another filing, expanded the role of the monitor. So that woman also made millions of dollars just, overlooking Trump's spreadsheets or whatever. Engoron also ordered the Trump organization to supply detailed information back over to the monitor. Engoron laid out a timeline in 2 months, the judge said. The monitor is ordered to submit a report. So now Trump has a hall monitor on his business indefinitely, right? She's made millions. He also put the Trumps on notice. He may order them to implement the monitor's recommendations. It's like we're living in a communist insanityville. Engoron also empowered the monitor to have copies of Trump's monthly bank and brokerage statements to be notified in advance of any transfers that of money or dissolution or any other things about debt financing, notify notify us about anything that you're moving around. So that's Engeron. That is Tish. She's getting very, very close to seizing this property, or who knows, right? Maybe any of the other properties. This is just the one that we have been seeing pictures of and hearing about. She said that she was salivating over that property called Trump Tower, and we should see her take that one nice and publicly, put a big fat padlock right on the front door. See how that goes for them. So the reason why this is going to backfire, we're going to hear from Luntz here in a second, is because people like Kimmel, they're out here mocking this. And I think their side really has not much else to live for. You know, they kind of just salivate off the pain and suffering of other people's. So when you're that type of person, you like this type of comedy where other people are being, dragged through the ringer, because if they're bad, that makes you feel good. That's the type of person they are. So they like Jimmy Kimmel. Here's what his so-called comedy routine sounded like, where they're talking about communists seizing property from Americans.
His magazine, Donald Trump, has some money problems. The I can't pay my billionaire said to be frustrated. He's having so much trouble coming up with a $464 million bond to cover the judgment against him in New York. Bond companies thus far have been reluctant to loan him that much money for the same reason you wouldn't loan a watermelon to a hippopotamus.
Funny.
Trump has until Monday to get the bond, and if he doesn't, the Attorney General may start seizing his assets, possibly as early as next week.
Go get it.
They could seize his golf course at Bedminster. They could take his buildings, which if they seize Trump Tower, where will Donald get his Mexican taco bowls? They could even seize his plane. I vote for that. I can think of nothing more delightful.
Seize his plane.
The sight of Donald Trump standing in line for a Southwest flight in boarding group C. I mean, some experts think Trump ultimately will get the bond, but these companies are leaving him hanging so they can squeeze him for the maximum amount. Basically, they have him over a barrel, and now they're behind him like Stormy Daniels with a rolled-up magazine. Like, have you been a bad boy, Donald? Do you want bondage? Because say it. Say I'm a bad boy. Say I'm... Sorry, I got carried away, but...
You did get carried away, Jimmy, you weird freak show. So it's weird, right? They're kind of, I think, cheering on the state seizing property from other people in this country. They're like little dumb seals clapping away back there. Or maybe it's a laugh track. I mean, I don't even know if anybody thinks that's funny. Unless you're just kind of a grotesque person and you like to laugh at your dictatorial government stealing property from anybody. And again, like, as much as I disdain Joe Biden, I'm not like, go seize his buildings, like what the heck? Like just get him out of office and he can get the hell out of our lives. Not that, not let's go wreck their entire heart and soul. So that's Kimmel, right? These people exist in America, unfortunately. But if they continue on with this, I think they're going to bite off more than they can chew. I think the seizure conversation is going to backfire, which is why I hope they do it. We've been saying this here for a little bit, that go ahead. You want to play this game? How about Trump just calls your bluff? You're not going to get the $450 million. Go take a building, see how this works out for you. So Frank Luntz was on with CNN, and here is what he said about this when asked what this will do for the election if Tish barricades the front door to Trump buildings.
All right, Frank, the politics of this. Folks in the Biden campaign are already starting to refer to Donald Trump as broke Don, which is interesting. And then there is the possibility that the New York Attorney General, Tish James, would have to start or would start seizing assets, maybe even buildings. How do you think that would play?
I want you to remember this moment.
Tell us, Frank.
And don't forget it. If the New York Attorney General...
We said this like 3 days ago, by the way.
...starts to take his homes away, starts to seize his assets. It's all going to be on camera. Pundits are going to sit there and scream about this. This man cannot be elected. You're going to create the greatest victimhood of 2024, and you're going to elect Donald Trump. If they take his stuff, he's going to say that this is proof that the federal government and the establishment and the swamp in Washington and all the politicians across the country and the attorneys generals and all of this, that this is a conspiracy to deny him the presidency.
It is.
He's going to go up in the polls just like he went up every single time they indicted him. Let's not talk about whether it's justified or not, but it will prove the things that he's saying on the campaign trail, and he will go up, and it may just elect him president. Do not forget that. And I say this to the Attorney General right now. If you play politics on this, this is what the secretaries of state did in Colorado, what they did in, I believe it was Maine. His numbers went up in both states.
Yeah, ballot removal.
I don't understand. I'm almost speechless in how pathetic the opposition to Trump has been and how completely totally misguided. And this is a perfect example of it.
Well, they have TDS, right? So they're so deluded. Like, Tish is in on this one. What's she gonna do? Back off? This is her whole campaign. She ran for office on this one. I'm gonna be a real pain in his butt. Remember that one? And her face was spasming all over the place. Illegitimate president, which is insurrectionary language that she never got indicted for or prosecuted. Thanks, Liz. But can she let up off the gas on this thing? I don't think so. It's her whole reason for existing. She'll be the person who folds to Trump. She's got to go take the building. Got to go take this all the way to the end. And so what happens if Trump, as we're going to read from his truths here in a second, what if he just says, come and take it?
What do you think about that?
I mean, my biggest question, this is the beauty of Frank having his job, which I don't have, is that happened, what you're talking about, Maine, Colorado, when you're talking about what happened in a primary. And while I don't disagree with the optics, I've spoken to people inside Trump world who are saying, instead of bankruptcy, we sit in the peace. Come to Trump Tower, please. We'll have cameras there. We'll have that fight. We'll win that optics battle. I think the bigger question is, in a general election, and given the fact that the Biden campaign has really latched on to this in a way that they haven't in most legal issues.
Broke down. I've been surprised to hear that.
He was joking about it last night at a fundraiser as well that was off camera, whether or not that rise in the polls can carry into a general election audit. And you'd know better than, I mean, you're talking to people, you'd know better.
How is Donald Trump beating Joe Biden? He's got 85 indictments that still exist. Felonies. How is he?
Because they're not legitimate. They're not seen as legitimate. You goons are going to have to figure this one out. You're going to learn it the hard way. You can keep using the institutions as cudgels of power, but when you do it against your political opponent and you do it in a way that's so nakedly opposed to justice, no one's going to believe you. No one cares about your stupid felonies, okay? Keep saying it as much as you want. He's beating him because the DOJ is lacking in credibility. And this is the problem when you are unjust. Like, this is why the people who become the dictators ultimately fail, right? The gravity of their power becomes all-consuming, and they use it and abuse it, and they lose their credibility and their legitimacy, and then they go. And unfortunately, I think that, America's going through that right now. The entire structure is evaporating its legitimacy. So the people don't see it anymore, right? We were told that our government was competent and capable, and they would protect us against the pandemic and be very competent, and we have state-of-the-art military and spent millions and all this crap, right? Then we got lectured, and they failed at that. Then we got lectured about what an insurrection it was. They lied to us about that. Then they lied about the border. That's secure. And they tell us that inflation's transitory. So when they come out with 91 original felonies, no one cares. And every time that they add more or try to take some property or steal a building or throw them off the ballot, it confirms everything we've been saying here. And they just keep going. So I hope they continue on. And I think that they're so foolish that they will.
Beating Joe Biden with the economy getting better and things cleaning up. Okay, you still have inflation. You still have got immigration. Trump is leading. And in the 7 swing states, Trump is up by the margin of error in 5 out of 7. Why is that happening? Because his critics are stupid and they're running a horrible campaign.
Yeah.
And for those people who do not want Donald Trump back, they should be thankful that the people who are orchestrating his loss are as pathetic and they don't understand the American people.
No, they don't, man. Frank Luntz is fired up. Yeah. So I wonder if he's going to call his, BFF Kevin McCarthy after that stream and, talk to him about it. The whole point is I absolutely agree with Frank Luntz. That is dead on. Seizing property is not going to go so well for them because it is tangible. You can taste it. You can feel it. And people work their entire lives for their property. And it is part of your livelihood, right? This is the Lockean theory of property rights. You are transferring your life into the property, right? You're mixing your skills and your time and your creativity and your thinking with resources in the world, and you create value, which is your life going into that. So when they inflate your dollars, when they steal your money to fund some stupid war somewhere, when they write $1.2 trillion checks that we can't have and give credit cards to people who don't even belong here, that is theft not only of your money, but of your livelihood, of your life. That's why I get so irritated about it. So they're doing that now in full fashion by taking his property away from him, and that is like stealing his life. And it's a disgusting thing. So Trump is obviously very unhappy about this. And a lot of people on the left are listening to this saying, Trump just stepped in it, man. He really has done a number on himself here. Here's why. Trump posted this March 22nd, 4:14 a.m. He says, through hard work, talent, and luck, I currently have almost $500 million in cash. And Letish is like, oh, boy. She's wondering, what the heck? That's my money. I need to steal that back. Engeron ordered that for me. Trump says that's a substantial amount, which I intended to use in my campaign for president. Now, the often overturned political hack judge, Areola, on the rigged and corrupt AG case, where I've done nothing wrong, knew this, wanted to take it away from me, that 500 mil. And that's where he came up with this shocking number, which coupled with his crazy interest demand is $454 $4 million. I did nothing wrong, says Trump, except win an election in 2016 that I wasn't even expected to win. And it did even better in 2020. And now I lead by a lot in 2024. This is communism in America. Now, I think Trump is accurate that Engoron had a full enema of his entire financial life, right? Because this case was a financial case and everything was under subpoena. And they had the CFO of the Trump organization, Alan Weisselberg, there, right? So he probably has kind of a good idea of what his finances look like. It's very curious, right? I think kind of goading them. The point is, it's not that Trump doesn't have 500 million. Yeah, he's got 500 million. It's just not for you, Latish. Sorry. And if you come and take it, that's money that was earmarked directly for the 2024 campaign, and you're going to be stealing money from my election. That's election interference. And come and take it. So I've got the money. That's not the problem. It's just not for you. So let's see what you do about that there, Tish. Now, here were some other posts from Trump, and he was talking a lot today about this. He says, Arthur Areola Engoron, aka the Nip, those are our words, not his, is a rogue judge who was intimidated by the big, nasty, and ugly mouth of Letitia James, and her stinky feet too, because she took her shoes off in court. Considered by many to be the worst attorney general in the U.S., she's a low IQ individual who campaigned for governor, also used my name, and then got trounced. She and her puppet Engoron, who valued Mar-a-Lago at $18 million when it's worth 50 to 100 times that amount, have destroyed all business prospects in New York. We're going to hear from O'Leary in a minute. And that is already dying or dead, but have no fear. When I become the 47th president, we're going to make New York great again. We got a couple more from Trump. Says, so one corrupt radical left judge in New York, a Trump hater at the highest level, can disobey and laugh at the appellate division ruling that gives me a victory and then confiscate New York property from me that took a lifetime of hard work to accumulate and build? It sounds like communism to me. There should be no fine. I did nothing wrong. Release the gag order, Engoron. And meanwhile, Trump is gagged, right? He can't even talk about this case, lest he be in violation of a court order. He says, no trial, no jury, no crime, no victim, only a crooked judge and a corrupt Trump-hating AG who takes her orders directly from the White House. Election interference at a level never seen before. He says, the New York AG used a statute to go after me that has never been used before, not once, for such a purpose. In and of itself is so unconstitutional and unfair. Under this statute, I get no jury, I have no rights. All decision and rights are given to, in this case, a corrupt, Trump-hating judge who came up with a crazy out of thin air award in order to damage me politically and to not allow me to use any of the large amount of cash I have built up over the years through hard work, insight, instinct, and diligence on my political campaign for president. Now, that is just what crooked Joe Biden wanted this political hack, coupled with a corrupt and racist attorney general, to do. I did nothing wrong. This is simply a taking, like eminent domain, right? They're taking your property when the government comes in and steals from you. Now, much like what is done in communist countries and will leave it an irreparable stain on New York and its judicial system, it is totally unconstitutional, including the gag order imposed. The statute of limitations was already ruled on for me, telling us that numerous businesses have ended plans to relocate into New York because of this fabricated witch hunt. They see what's going on. They want no part of it. Peekaboo James, the racist and the corrupt AG, is considered the worst AG in the country. She spends all her time and money going after Trump and almost nothing on fighting violent crime. Engoron is a flake radical left Trump hater who despises and disrespects the appellate division and refuses to do as they say. He considers them a joke. So bad and dangerous for New York State's system of justice. And our last one says, this outrageous judgment simply fails to recognize the complete victory last year on statute of limitations. The crooked judge and biased AG Tish disregard the appeals court, which makes clear that most of the claims fall outside the statute of limitations. And none of their absurd arguments change that fact. Biased, crooked, and incompetent Engoron, who never should have presided over this case, it should have all gone to the commercial division, but really shouldn't have even been filed at all, completely ignored the fact that I had already won most of this case on appeal. But they don't care about the law, the facts, or anything, but tying up my money and tying up my property. This case should be over, but instead the AG wants to abuse her power and steal my money and interfere in the election, right? And everything is meant to bog him down. So it's not only monetarily, right? They're going to cost him a ton of money, right? Millions and millions of dollars in defending against all these cases cannot be used in the campaign. So it's money, it's reputation. So they're going after him. He's a criminal, 91 felonies, and all those claims. Then they're going after the civil claims so that they can also damage his reputation and hit him monetarily with the E. Jean Carroll case. They're also using procedural mechanisms like the ballot removal efforts, using the Constitution to try to disqualify him. But think about the time too, right? His time is going to be bundled up in all of these trials. He was in the Engeron trial, showing up in New York. He's been down to Florida. He's been in Judge Chutkan's courtroom. He's been all over this country dealing with this. So that means he cannot campaign. So the opportunity cost here is massive. So it's financial assassination. Newt Gingrich makes this point. We remember him, former Speaker of the House. And here's what he says about this. Trump responded to a lot of this. And here's Newt.
Trump took a swipe at her on Truth Social yesterday, writing, numerous businesses have ended plans to relocate into New York because of the...
Well, I mean, first of all, Tish James is probably driving more taxpayers and more profitable businesses out of New York than any other single example. We've already had over 600,000 New York taxpayers leave to go to Florida or Texas or Georgia or North Carolina or Tennessee. So the flight will just increase. But remember, 40 years ago, Tom Wolfe wrote Bonfire of the Vanities, in which a corrupt New York judge and a corrupt New York prosecutor get an extraordinary sentence for a white financier who'd been involved in a hit-and-run case. That's 40 years ago. The corruption's gotten worse. New York City politics is frankly a cesspool. The Attorney General is a perfect example of that. And what you're watching is a financial assassination. This is a deliberate effort to destroy somebody because they're a presidential candidate. And I think the country understands that. And I think the country, most people, are enraged that the rule of law could degenerate into this kind of rule of power.
Exactly right. I couldn't agree more. I think that it's going to be very important to continue to communicate this, right? A lot of people are going to be under this stupor. Well, Trump's a felon and all that stuff. Maybe he deserves to have that property taken away. We got to continue to be focused on spreading the truth. But once people know the truth, it's hard to understand how this is justified in any way. I mean, seizing buildings from Tish and her made-up case is wild times in America. Here, agreeing with us is Mr. Wonderful, Kevin O'Leary.
Now you're talking. You're right. This is hurting the American brand. What's going on in New York it has nothing to do with Trump. That case is over. What's going on now is concerning financial markets all around the world, because in the United States, and everybody, I don't care what color you are, red or blue or independent, doesn't matter, we are the bastion of safety when it comes to investing large pools of capital. That's what America represents. We have property rights, we have an appellate system, we have law people trust, and we give you good returns with the least amount of resistance. And what's happening in New York is tainting the American brand. I mean,
it's
seizing assets after 22 days? In a bankruptcy court, you get years to resolve this. This is not a good look on New York. It doesn't matter this Trump. It could be anybody. I think that's very bad for the American brand. And I also would argue that you think about if this is going to help New Yorkers, they should be asking for better management. I'm very disturbed. And the way I look at it, and I speak to many institutional capital fronts, including sovereign wealth, because I'm trying to buy TikTok right now. So I'm running all around the world trying to raise $30-40 billion. And they all ask me the same thing. We're watching this New York thing play out. It looks to everybody like it was some dress-up court day when the parents were out and everybody got dressed up in robes and had fun acting out some court trial.
Yeah, and I want to, I think, make a distinction between, business professionals and the political class. So, the country is looking at this through multiple different lenses. We're here, we're watching it, we're on the side of liberty and freedom. They're the big bureaucrat, cheater, bully, liars. And we're observing what we think should be equal justice, where you get, juries, cross-examinations, you don't get gagged to speak about the case, you don't have two judges who are in there basically doing the same thing. And the star witness of the case is Michael Cohen, who's a convicted perjurer, who also, according to another federal judge, lied in your court. That's your star witness, and you find him to be believable. Like, the whole thing's, a total charade. So we recognize that, but we're looking through it through a political lens, right? Our end here is to save the country, get Trump reelected, stop the insanity, the TDS dementoids from hyperventilating all the time, shake them back into reality, and let's go, have better lives together. But we're not buying property in New York, right? There's a whole separate group of people that are. Opposite of us are the TDSers. They love to see people fall off their roofs, and that brings them true happiness. So their existence is to just prosecute Trump, but set us aside, set the politics aside. There's a whole group of people that are pure business people. They don't care about the politics per se. They care about making money, right? They care about building buildings and, getting a good ROI and conquering, New York real estate and all this. They're paying close attention to this, and they're realizing, wait a minute, if our politics or anything goes off the rails and we now anger Tish, we have a precedent in this place where they can just come and seize our property. So all the pros, right? And I would imagine Kevin O'Leary is well plugged into that class. They're all going, what the heck is going on here?
When are the adults coming back into this? There are no adults yet.
No, they're not, because they have one mission in mind, which of course is to stop Trump. So what do some of the people in power have to say about this? This is a representative called Lawler. He is a New York GOP guy. He's a Republican, and he said this in response to what's happening there, that this is a pretty big deal. Trump should have the right to appeal. What's happening with Tish is inappropriate. appropriate.
Regardless of what one may think about the former president, he is still entitled to due process of law. I don't believe these properties should be seized pending appeal. I think he has every right to appeal that judgment, which anybody who watched that trial recognizes that judge was irrational in so many of his decisions. And I do think a lot of this will be, if not all of it, overturned on appeal.
Yeah, I think he's right. But what if they are able to bundle up and set aside, limit the use of $500 million in campaign money? That's a pretty big win. If they can hold that in abeyance and escrow for, let's say, 9 months, election comes and goes, okay, then they give you the money back. They reverse some of this stuff on appeal, but Trump is now out liquid $500 million that he could have used to secure the presidency. Could be a pretty big problem for them. So that's Lawler, and this is the AG from Missouri. He is a great attorney general, not a useless AG who is corrupt and a partisan hack like Tish. And he was brought on over on with Fox asked about Tish, and he says the only fraud here is Tish masquerading as a competent attorney. This is the AG from Missouri.
Miscarriage of justice. Remember, this was a fraud trial. The only fraud here is that AG Letitia James is masquerading as a competent attorney. Look at some of her pleadings. There's no reference to case law. And why is that? It's because there's no legal authority for what she's doing. Let's remember, this was a civil fraud trial where the claim was that banks gave loans to President Trump based on misrepresentation. And yet Letitia James isn't going after those banks for failing to do their due diligence when providing those loans. The only reason they provided those loans, in fact, was because President Trump is a brilliant businessman who was enormously successful and made tons of money for these banks and every other investor. And Letitia James hates that. She hates his success. And so she's weaponized the justice system against him. And it's terrible for all Americans. It undermines due process and undermines the rule of law.
Yeah, remember when Tish would say too male, too pale, and too stale at her campaign speeches? Too male, too pale, and too stale, right? That's Trump, I guess. I don't know. So she's unhappy about that. Now the communists are in charge. They can retake his property.
Theft by the state of New York at Letitia James' direction of property owned by the president. And remember, this is property that he obtained legitimately through his business acumen. But I think it's important to remember that the appeal bond is intended to prevent a losing party in a lawsuit from taking their money and fleeing. And yet the assets she's trying to seize here are immovable. Those assets will be there after the appeal is completed. So there's no need to race through this process of seizing property. But also I would point out that the whole purpose of a judgment at the end of a civil trial is to make a party whole. When you have no victim, because everybody who did business with President Trump as part of these transactions made money, there's no one to make whole. So again, there's no legal justification to seize this property.
Also, on the fleeing argument, the job that Trump's going for is in Washington, D.C. Kind of tough to flee the country and be president. So that completely blows that line of thinking out of.
It's more about humiliation, okay? Unfortunately, I think this is the thing, right? There's a lot of different humiliation rituals that they're trying to push people through. This is one of them. There are many of them that are applying to Trump right now, right? The process is the penalty. They're trying to humiliate him. He's not a billionaire, right? Biden comes out and says, broke dawn. You know, again, that has some really serious risk of backfiring on them because it's like the bully who has an unfair advantage, who's picking on the new kid and then making fun of the new kid to everyone else and saying, what a loser. He's such a weenie. He got beat up. You go, well, look, Trump is Trump, right? And I know they're petrified to death of the dude, but he's a private citizen right now, former president, and he's got a ton of incredible Americans at his back. That's a lot of power for sure. But legally, right, he's just a citizen. Joe Biden has the entire DOJ in the office of the presidency. So to turn them all loose, we've seen tons of evidence that they're coordinating all of this. They met with Fannie. We know that Jack Smith basically took the order from Merrick Garland, who took the order from Joe, and the connections go on and on. But the point is, Tish and this entire onslaught is meant to humiliate him. And in response is that it's not working, okay? Trump is not becoming humiliated. He is instead growing stronger, right? That negative energy is saying, okay, let's go, right? And now we'll see how they battle over this bond, and Monday should be very, very spicy indeed. So we're going to continue to cover this, my friends. We're going to see what Tish does over the weekend. I'm sure she's going to be plotting away and seeing whether or not she can put a padlock on the front of Trump Tower. We're going to be here continuing to cover this. Of course, we are going to be here on Monday, and we'll see what the day has in store for us. But thank you for subscribing wherever it is you're watching us. Thanks for liking this video. Thanks for inviting someone you know or love to come over here and join us when we go live so that they can see what's happening behind the scenes in these cases. We've also got some great links down in the descriptions below. Watchingthewatchers.locals.com is where you can find our members only content if you want to join us for our morning streams, our Saturday streams, and meet a great community. We also have robertgovea.com. You can sign up for our newsletter there, and then when the newsletter gets delivered to your inbox, forward it to everyone you've ever met, they'll thank you for it. We'll see you back here on the next one.